tariffs, because as he explains it, John, he lived paycheck to paycheck most of his life as a career student, and the fact is that these cheap goods are part of the American dream. This is what he had to say.
I do think this version of tariff policy that's broad-based, indiscriminate, applies tariffs to friend and foe alike, is not a win for the American people.
What's interesting, too, is that he said that the American people have to be honest with themselves and that cheap goods are needed here in the country. It's interesting, too, as this meeting is going to take place at the White House, he was said very nice things about Canada as an ally and as a trading partner. He seemed to hope that this relationship could get fixed rather quick.
All right, Mark, Preston, Paul, and our thanks to both of you. Kate?
All right, let's talk about this meeting and the tariff implications here. Joining us right now is Douglas Holtz-Eakin, an economist who worked for former President George W. Bush. Of course, he's now the president of the American Action Forum. It's good to see you again. So Trump's position on Canada he keeps saying, we don't need their cars, we don't need their energy, their lumber. I mean, he said we don't need anything from them. The way he said it is, he said we buy it because we want to be helpful, is what he said in one comment recently. I mean, how accurate is it how he's describing the trade relationship here?
Well, that's not a very accurate characterization of the relationship. I mean, trade is beneficial for both parties. We buy things from Canada because they're relatively cheap compared to doing them here, and they buy things from us for the same reason. And so I think the important thing to recognize is that we talk about the U.S. and Canada, but there's one unified economic entity called North America. Mexico, the U.S., and Canada have lots and lots of economic linkages. They're tightly intertwined. And the notion that we can put tariffs on both those countries and somehow separate ourselves is actually courting great economic danger. That's a really, probably among the most dangerous things the president's proposed.
What is your, if you would like to say hope springs eternal, what is your hope or best case scenario coming out of this meeting between the president and the prime minister today?
Well, I think that the prime minister said pretty clearly that he wants to look past where the United States and Canada are right now and think about the long-term structure of the economic and security relationship. That would allow Mr. Trump to specify what exactly he would like to get out of that relationship and sort of lay down some markers, say, Canada, look, we need these efforts at the border. We'd like you to make these efforts toward China, which likes to reroute goods through you to get to the United States. Whatever it may be, lay down a clear set of objectives for the United States in that relationship, and then Canada can counter. And that's the nature of a negotiation. I think the difficulty thus far has been we don't know exactly what the president is striving for in this relationship. He's put the tariffs on and said, I want you to do better, but they don't know what that means.
And that's a great point, because that's what we've heard from, especially the leaders in Canada, is they don't know what the marker or the measure is for when the fentanyl tariffs would have been lifted, or any of that. They had no measure of what was enough and what was progress. Kind of the latest on the tariff front beyond Canada is the president's saying that he's going to put a 100% tariff on the film industry. I want to play for you how he talked about this yesterday.
Hollywood doesn't do very much of that business. They have the nice sign and everything's good, but they don't do very much. A lot of it's been taken to other countries, and a big proportion. And I'm actually...
Nothing brings people together like a great meal. And at Bite Size, communities coming together around food is what we're all about. Join us as we take you around to some of the best and
Estás escuchando éxitos. Otra vez. Éxitos mexicanos.
Exclusivamente.
If you've used tuning much, you probably already know how to favorite your...
Sin maldad, maestro Eco dice que ayuda a la salud, que favorece el comportamiento, que hay una herramienta que evoluciona dentro del cerebro y que te hace más fuerte, te beneficia, así que todo a chismear.
Según este estudio también, perdón, alcalde, compartir información sobre terceros puede ser una herramienta evolutiva para protegerse de amenazas sociales y crear alianzas más fuertes, según los autores de este estudio.
Yo estoy muy feliz porque yo me di cuenta ya y entiendo por qué diablo que el vacilón se lleva tan bien como hermanito.
Ya lo sabes.
Porque yo tengo una amistad que yo no quería tanto una persona como él.
Mi hermanita, ese es como mi hija.
Y el gigante, ese es mi hermanota.
Media loca y todo, pero como mi hija.
Pero con el Pacheque yo me llevo bien. No.
Acabando todo el mundo,
effective is not only that she's younger, but that she comes off authentic without saying I'm trying to kick the older crowd aside, because it was very important. She did that tour with 83-year-old Bernie Sanders, while some of the younger members of Congress saying the old guard needs to retire. She's showing a balance and a maturity as a young person and a message that penetrates.
And by the way, what a great message to have. You've got all these Ivy League boys, that are in the Trump administration that went all the, no offense to Ivy League boys or anywhere, but all these guys, billionaire Ivy Leaguers, right, attacking her, going, oh, she's an elitist, she's like, what either? It's like a bartender or a barista or whatever she was. She's like, what are you talking about? I had to work my ass off to like stay one step ahead of creditors and debtors. I know you.
And she talks as one who was had to work her way against some trust fund babies that are playing blue collar workers in the White House that has no idea what it is. Her authenticity makes her, I think, and I think that goes beyond ages, because like I said, for her and Bernie to hook up, shows the age gap really dies if you dip.
That bell marks the end of regulation. Constellation Brands ringing the closing bell for you.
Stock Exchange. American Woodmark Corporation doing the honors at the NASDAQ and down S&P 500, snapping 9-day win streaks with small losses, even as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent signals trade deals could be coming soon. That's the scorecard on Wall Street, but winners stay late. Welcome to Closing Bell Overtime. I'm John Fort with Morgan Brennan.
We've got a big hour of earnings on the way, including results from the S&P 500's biggest winner of this year, Palantir, along with Ford, Mattel, Clorox, and more.
Plus, U.S. oil prices falling out of bed, settling at their lowest level since 2021 after OPEC Plus agreed to a jump in production. We're going to talk to ConocoPhillips board member Arjun Murthy about what's behind OPEC's decision and how much lower prices could go. As we await earnings, though, let's get straight to today's market action. Joining us now is Charles Schwab, Senior Investment Strategist Kevin Gordon, and CNBC Senior Markets Commentator Mike Santoli. Guys, good afternoon. Kevin, U.S.-China relations, I think, hanging over this market still. I have to imagine also over U.S. deals with other countries as the U.S. sort of wants to isolate China. Stocks effectively took a breather today after a strong jobs report, big tech earnings, Fed days Wednesday. What matters now for investors?
Well, I think a lot of in addition to earnings and the guidance or maybe lack thereof that companies are giving, it really is this gap, I think, between the soft data and the hard data, how big that gap is, even if it even exists at all. You'll probably start to see, I'd say maybe more into mid to late summer, that's when maybe the hard data starts to confirm, if at all, some of the weakness that we've seen in the soft data. And, the jobs report in particular, what becomes, I think, really important, especially because, a lot of the focus for the trade, disruptions around the world have been on the goods side of things, in particular our goods deficit. There is never really a lot of focus on the services surplus that we have with a lot of countries around the world. And I think in particular for something like U.S. tourism, if you were to take that and put it under a microscope, this pretty significant decline you've seen recently and how that potentially impacts sectors like leisure and hospitality here in the States, which are huge, and anything, adjacent to that industry in particular. So when you start thinking about getting into the June jobs reports and potentially what that means for the services side of the economy, that is one example of a hard data point, so to speak, where I think you could probably start to see some weakness filter over. But again, we have still a little bit of time to see whether that's the case. Per ISM services this morning, employment improved a little bit, still contracted, but that's going to be an important sequencing to follow.
And Mike Santoli, is that also a reason why we should expect to see the Fed stay on pause?
Yeah, I do think it makes sense to expect them to stay on pause. There just hasn't been enough of a buildup of the real weakness in the hard data, and certainly not a pure green light from the inflation numbers for them to be doing anything right now. All the rhetoric leading up into the blackout period of this meeting says that. Now, would they have some nods in the direction of maybe we could be prepared sooner than later if we do get some weakness to ease in June or something like that? Sure, I wouldn't rule that out at this point. The Fed has always said it's data dependent, and the data has started to soften up. So they could basically reposition their rhetoric without necessarily seeming like they were bending to any political pressure.
So, Kevin, there's lots that's going to happen, presumably. We don't know what exactly it'll be, but there will be a lot between now and summer.
Yeah.
Do you like this rally, even though it took a little bit of a breather here? Does it have legs?
I think it makes sense from the textbook standpoint of, you go through this massive washout in sentiment. I would say with an important caveat, though, a lot of it's been more on the attitudinal side, not as much on the behavioral side. But a really powerful force underpinning all of this, and Mike was mentioning it, we're leading it right into the closing bell, is the power of the retail trader and how strong that buy the dip mentality and a ignoring of, sell the rip mentality has been. And that's been, whether you track the data that comes from Vanda, whether you track the data that comes from ETF flows into the equity universe, all of that has been relatively strong throughout this period. So on the one hand, I think it is a support, or it has been a support for the market. On the other hand, if you do get more tariff-related uncertainty that kind of hits the market and comes from left field, and that does exacerbate more selling pressure, it does still mean that, households and investors are more exposed to stocks. So you probably get, the potential for another leg lower, especially if you don't see a meaningful recovery in bread statistics, which I would argue you're starting to see now. You're getting into those early phases of a big spike in the number of companies that are making new 4-week highs. If that follows through over to the number of new 52-week highs, which I think we've still got some runway, but if that happens, then you probably have more of a case to be made that there is more of a durable rally.
Well, speaking of retail investors, one of those names that's very widely held by retail investors and others, Palantir. We have those results just crossing, and we're going to bring them to you right now. Q1 EPS in line, 13 cents per share, but beats across the board on everything else. Revenue of $884 million, that's up 39% year over year. U.S. leading the charge once again. U.S. government revenue growing 45% year over year to $373 million. U.S. commercial surging 71% to $255 million. Palantir closed 139 deals of at least $1 million last quarter. For guidance, the AI and data analytics company raising forecasts, all metrics above street estimates. Q2 revenue now 934 to 938 million. Expected full year revenue forecast 3.89 billion to 3.9 billion. Expected U.S. commercial revenue is also expected to grow at least 68% this year. Higher free cash flow, higher adjusted income from operations also anticipated. Now, CEO and co-founder Alex Karp telling me, quote, "This is a moment for the world to see how you actually do next generation AI implementation. Our numbers show that the revolution is real, but you need specific and very particular products and ways of doing it to capture that value." On defense spending and geopolitics, Karp telling me, quote, "There's been a lot of reforms in the DoD that have made it possible for people to enter the market besides us." Super positive on that. The defense industrial base is going to be a metaphor for manufacturing globally, so we're very optimistic about how we can help manufacturing in the U.S. where the defense industrial base, both new and older, pave the way. We see our products heavily used there, and you know, America has all the advantages. We just have to take advantage of those advantages. Now,